Hello, everyone. I'm Janet Tarantino, the author of Dying to See, Revelations about God, Jesus, Our Pathways, and the Nature of the Soul. And I'd like to welcome you today to my YouTube channel called Exploring Everything Spiritual. Please click the like button below and feel free to share any video. And don't forget to subscribe below to see future amazing videos about everything spiritual. Our guest today is Father Nathan Castle, OP, which stands for Order of Preachers. Let me tell you a little bit about him. Father Nathan received his Master of Arts and Master of Divinity degrees from the Dominican School of Philosophy and Theology at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California. He served as campus ministries at Arizona State University, Stanford, and UC Riverside. He has chaired the executive board and the Catholic Campus Ministry Association, CCMA. He believes the Holy Spirit has given him a night job of helping souls who died suddenly and violently find afterlife peace. He's the author of And Toto 2, The Wizard of Oz as a Spiritual Adventure, as well as Afterlife Interrupted, books 1 and 2, which is about helping stuck souls cross over. He is a lecturer, workshop facilitator, and retreat director. He has helped more than 400 stuck and not so stuck souls who died suddenly and traumatically to adjust to the afterlife. Father Nathan, welcome to my program.
Thanks for having me on, Janet.
Great. Glad you're here. First, to clarify for the audience, your work is all-inclusive, correct?
Well, I do a lot of different things, if that's what you mean. I'm a practicing Catholic priest. I live on the campus of the University of Arizona in Tucson and help out a little bit at the Catholic Campus Ministry here, a couple of local churches. And during the pandemic, much of my work has moved on to Zoom and YouTube, like okay. We're doing today.
But the souls you help don't have to be Catholic to get your help.
Oh, certainly not. No.
Yeah, that's so.
And I would like help. That's all. They just need they need a little help. It doesn't matter what background they've come from.
Great. So first, I'd like to say your book, Toto 2, The Wizard of Oz as a Spiritual Adventure. That's my generation. It was genius. Yeah. So how did you come upon thinking about it that way?
I was one of those kids that grew up, in the early 60s when there were 3 channels and Wizard of Oz. There were no way to record anything at the time. If you wanted to see something, you had to sit down in front of the TV when it was on, use the bathroom during the commercial, and not miss anything. And when the Wizard of Oz would begin to be advertised, as it was, maybe 2 weeks out, everybody was talking about where they were going to watch it. It was even before there was a Super Bowl, but it was the same excitement as a Super Bowl party. And when I watched the fact that it got elders and young people and everybody in between, neighbors you didn't even know that well, it gathered community in a way that I thought, wow, the gospel stories are supposed to do this, but I've never seen anybody this excited to go to church. It built community in a way that stayed with me, and it made me wonder, what is it that is in this story that is so unitive?
It's fantastic. You believe, you're relating to the Yellow Brick Road as the path of life, right?
Yes, yeah, and it's a big circular story. The work of Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey.
No, I'm not familiar with that, but
he lived much of the 20th century and started life as a Roman Catholic, but he got frustrated with the bishops during the Scopes monkey trials in Tennessee in the 1920s, with that reading of the Genesis stories as history, as scientific history. And he knew that they were important stories, but they were mythic. And he ended up creating a category of kind of cultural anthropology and mythology, and spent his career studying that, and especially origin stories that are usually circular. Many origin stories have some sense of where we came from and where we're headed back to. Same thing with epic hero stories. A hero leaves all that's familiar at great risk, goes into a foreign place and has all kind of adventures, and then comes home with some sort of a totem or elixir or something that greens the place that he originated at. So the Oz story is a circular story because you end up back where you began, but you're changed because of everything that's occurred.
Yes, it is like life because you're finding your way back home once you're here. Yeah. But let's talk about the other books that were equally fascinating. Are there specific thought-provoking questions that you ask souls, and what's your methodology for dealing with them?
Well, the basics of it started about 25 years ago. I began having dreams that I call contact dreams that were not about my own psyche working things out the way some dreams do. They were from someone else, but happening within my dreamscape. And the thing they had in common was they almost always showed me a sudden violent death. Although they're also buffered so that I wasn't terrorized in my sleep. They got the point across without too much blood and guts, just people showing me something that caused their death. Almost always it was that. Once in a while, I'd get somebody that had some horrible thing happen during their life that made them feel like they died inside. But anyway, I began to write the stories down. I would get with a prayer partner and go into prayer about it. And I found that I could let them speak through me to a partner, only with St. Michael the Archangel, St. Mary, a whole bunch of saint and angel friends to keep me and my prayer partners safe. But I think of it as a gift of prophecy, allowing Christian and Jewish folk are used to the biblical prophets who allow their voice to be borrowed by God so that a message can be conveyed. So the people come through and they talk for only a few minutes. They've been vetted. They're not random. They've been brought in a very orderly way because they're at a level in the afterlife where they needed special care, but now they're graduating from that. I compare it to the people at a hospital that are in charge on the day that you're discharged of seeing that you understand your medications, your follow-up appointments, your ride, or will you be well fed, that kind of thing. The people that help you out the door. I think that's kind of what my partners and I do.
Yeah. And so who vets them for you?
Well, it seems like there's a system that reminds me of a healthcare continuum, not just one person necessarily, but because they died suddenly and violently, some of them need the afterlife equivalent of emergency response. They need somebody to gather them, collect them, bring them to a place where their needs will be taken care of. Each one is a little different, so what they need depends upon their circumstance and how they understand it. But they're given what they need, and over time, they come to a point where they simply don't need this kind of care any longer. And there's a kind of sense of graduation. They have enough energy or power now to move to a next level, but they need a little boost. They need somebody to assist them from place to place.
Does somebody come get them to take them to that other level, or do they walk into a light or just fade away?
Originally, we didn't have a manual about how to do this. And so we just did the best we could. And because they were traumatized, I thought it best that the first person they see that would be bringing them to a next realm would be a very calming person. So I used to ask them, can you think of anybody who loved you who died before you did? Is there somebody on the other side that you know you were loved by and who it would not be frightening to see? And so that produced a lot of grandparents. School teachers showed up in large numbers, especially women school teachers, sometimes Boy Scout leaders, coaches, a lot of people from childhood when I think life was simpler. Eventually it seems like word got out and they came prepared and didn't need to be that prompted by that question. They kind of had someone in mind already. And then we all have a guardian angel. I'm a Catholic Christian, and so that's the language I use. Other people might call them spirit guides or something else. But in my understanding, we all came here with a guardian angel who was with us for the entirety of our life. And one of their important tasks was to lead us out of the body into the next thing at our death. And many times they'll just say, well, I've gotten to know my angel here, so I don't really need anybody else. My angel will be able to take it from here.
Okay. My guide's an angel watcher. They call him the angel watcher because all he does is watch me and protect me through my life.
Well, that's what a guard does. Keeps their eye on you.
Yeah, yeah. How is there any particular average length of time it takes? Can you give us an example of somebody that you helped?
Do you mean time about from when they died to when they come to me?
Yeah, when they die until they come to you, what's the longest span you say that's been?
The longest is really rare, but there have been maybe like 3 centuries, something like that. Almost all of them have been within the last 60, 70 years. I'm going to be 66 in a couple of weeks. And most are people that died within my lifetime. And those that didn't died maybe in the decades right before I was born.
Okay. Okay. And do you have, how far away have spirits been? Have they come from other countries, or are they all local, or?
It's really funny, Janet, when it first started, like the first year or two, I felt like I had a territory like a salesman. I'm from Southeast Texas on the Louisiana border on the Gulf Coast, Beaumont, Port Arthur, Texas. And I had a lot of people early on that were from the Southeast, from Georgia, Carolinas, Florida, around in there. I haven't even spent very much time there, but for whatever reason, there were a bunch of those. And then eventually it started being all over the place. Maybe about 1/3 are international, maybe 2/3, or maybe 3/4 American. But they can all speak English, whether they knew it, whether they ever learned it or not. Sometimes they marvel, I never learned to speak English, but all I'm doing is forming my words and they're coming out in English.
Cool.
That's not a problem.
So what's the farthest away that you've gone? What country?
Maybe Iraq. There's been such violence there for such a long time. There's been several from there and other parts in the Middle East. A few from Central America or South America. Yeah, that's. And then I haven't, once in a great while, I'll get somebody from Europe, but it seems like it's more of the Middle East and South America. I haven't any idea why. All I do is go to sleep and make myself available, and the spirit takes care of the rest.
Yeah, we just handle what God gives us.
Precisely. In this and every other thing. It's not that I'm not living in this kind of ozone layer all the time. I have a lot of ministry tasks that are pretty mundane. But I call this my night job, and I love all of the work that I've been given to do.
Can you tell the audience about this this gentleman that first came to you, the one that was sitting on the engine?
Yeah, he was the first to do this. His name, well, I didn't know his name at first. I was in a dream where I was finishing a round of golf, coming into the bar afterwards with a priest friend, and we were just going to have a beer or something after a round. And when we got into the place, there was a silent auction for a charity going on. And I've run nonprofits most of my life, and so fundraising like that is commonplace part of my life. But on a far wall, this was before we had televisions mounted on walls, flat screens. But there was a piece of framed art on a wall, and it was so horrific that it was galvanizing. I couldn't take my eyes off it. I walked closer toward it. It moved toward me, and we met. And inside the picture frame, this film started of a young man. He wasn't in a car accident. He was sitting on the radiator with his feet on the bumper, so sitting facing outward from a car with the hood up, and he burst into flames. I knew it was in the late 50s, but because of the car, it had fins and chrome like the cars did at that time. My first car was like that. And it turned out that he was very angry because he had been taught that people die because God takes them. And so his image of God was of a body snatcher who burned him to death. And his first words were, "Who the hell does he think he is taking me just when my life was getting good?"
And how did you help him get over this? You have special questions that you asked them?
I was on a retreat at the time. I was off giving the retreat, and one of the persons on it was a friend who I knew had a lot of uncommon spiritual gifts, and she and I had been prayer partners for some time by then. I just said, "Something happened in the night. Would you pray with me about it and see if we can understand what this is and how we might help if we're being called up to help?" And she said, "Well, whoever he is, he wants to talk to you very badly. Would it be okay if I allow him to?" Because she had that gift. And that's how we got talking to him. And I just asked him like I would any counseling. As a priest, I'd done pastoral counseling for 37 years. And one of the first things you ask a person is, "How can I help you?" You're at their service. And he explained that he had only been with his wife for a couple of years at the time of his death. They'd had a child together who was only a baby when he died, but he kept watch on her. And now she married her a lawyer, moved to South Carolina, but now she's got cancer. She's dying, and I want to greet her when she comes, but I can't the way I am. So he was able to be pretty succinct and say, we need to get him ready to greet his wife. That was our task.
That was your task. And did you asked him a special question about where this idea of God being a body snatcher?
Somebody had to, you don't spring from the womb thinking that. Somebody had to teach him that. And I asked him, and I think he said it was Brother James, his pastor, had said that. I asked him how he knew about God at all, because not all people even believe there is a God or understand that there is a God. And he said, well, his mother taught him about God, and she used to beat me while I said my prayers. So I thought, wow, that could put a strange idea or two about God in a child's mind, getting beaten while you pray. So we worked with what he brought, and I told him, I said, cancer's got its own schedule, and we asked him what year he died in, and he said 1960, and this was going on 2000. So 38 to 40 years, I don't remember exactly what year it was, but it was right around that time. And said, now you're in a hurry because your wife's got cancer, and cancer's got its own schedule. So we don't have the leisure of going slow and steady with you. We're going to have to kind of hurry you up. And people in general don't like to be hurried. And if ever you get tired of us, you just say the word. but it's not because we're impatient. We're just trying to help you do what you think is important. So it took us about 3 sessions over 3 weeks to help him get ready. And we needed him we figured if he hadn't been anywhere or done anything, if you can imagine that, for 40 years, he created his own afterlife world where he wanted to be isolated. He was just so angry. That's not hard to understand. Mm-hmm. You probably wanted to have some privacy when you're really angry and just get everybody out. That's what he created. Not because he was punished, it's just what he chose to create. But then once he was there, he was on his own and hadn't been with anybody since his death. So I said to him, don't you think it would be best if we got you practiced a little bit? Is there somebody that we could have come for you, that maybe you go for a walk or something, just to get out, get some air or something, circulate a bit? So he chose his dad, who he didn't know very well. His dad died when Ray was 10. And I said, can you think of a time when you and he had a great time together? Because he said, I didn't know him very well, and I was sort of afraid of him. And he said, well, one time we went and looked at cars. And I said, well, if we asked him to come, would it be okay? Would you feel safe? And so we asked him and said, don't come too close, stand at a distance so that Ray can take a look at you. I said, I'm going to ask God, because I'm a priest and that's what we do. So I asked God, could Ray's father, is he available? Would he like to show up? And within 10 seconds, he did. I didn't see him, but Ray did. And they went for a little walk. The next time we got together a week later, we asked, where'd you go? And he said, we went and looked at cars. So this father-son duo in the spirit world found their way back to each other by looking at cars. And eventually we helped him get himself ready to greet his wife.
Could you see him? Because you said you couldn't see his father. Could you see him?
No, I had the images that first came in the dream, and then I could hear him through my friend. But no, I didn't get anything else visual from him. Sometimes I do, but not in that case. There wasn't anything visual really, other than what he described. So sometimes they'll say, "Look at that," and I'll say, "Well, you're going to have to describe that because I can't see it as you do." And so then I'll get a secondhand image in my head because they described a scene. But in the end, it was really sweet. I told him, "I think I know what's the matter, Ray, and I don't think you're going to like it." But he said, "What?" And I said, "Well, I just think you behave like a caveman every time you talk about this woman. You only were married to her for 2 years, and now it's been 40 since then. She's bound to have loved lots of other people. You're the only dead husband, and you're the only person she had a child with. So you are certainly very important, but you're just not the entire show, but you act like you are." I said, "I think if you would just be a gentleman and calm down a little bit and presume that maybe you're in a very small elite group that greets her when she arrives. Could you do that?" And he didn't like that idea, but he received it and he pondered it. And the third time that we met with him, said, "How's it going, Ray?" And he said, "Big news, my wife passed." I said, "Well, wow, that is bad news. How'd it go?" That was the whole point of this. And he said, "Well, it was like you said, there was just a few of us." And he said, "You would have been proud of me. I was a perfect gentleman."
Great.
"Well, good for you. I knew you had it in you." And then after that, we said, "Well, it looks like our job here is done. It's probably time for you to get on to other things." And he said, "Yes, sure, I think that's true." And I said, "Well, now that you know how to," it was saying goodbye to a friend that you might not see for a long time. So I just said, "Now that you know how to be a greeter in the afterlife, I wonder if you would just keep an eye on me. And when it's my time, would you mind being a part of the welcoming party?" And I'll never forget it. He said, "Why, sir, I would be most honored. Just look for the perfect gentleman."
Oh, that's so nice.
So I'm in good health and haven't any plans to leave anytime soon, but I trust that Ray knows how to keep an eye. And when it's time, he can circle back around and I'll get to meet him face to face, however that works.
Face to face, I know. It's amazing that you say people greet us there, because when my mom was passing away a few years ago, and she said she could see up into heaven, and she said there is a gathering coming. There's a gathering going on, and as she got closer to death, the gathering got bigger. So yeah, we are greeted by.
You probably know there's a category for that. It's called a pre-death visitation. Those stories happen often enough that there's a language for it. It's called a pre-death visitation.
Oh, okay, yeah. The last person she saw before she died was my dad, who died 9 days before her. Because they had always said they'd walk into heaven hand in hand, and he came back to take her hand when it's their time to go. Yeah.
My grandparents did that. They died on the same day after 64 years.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, 18 hours apart. Yeah.
Yeah. It's tragic, but it's comforting to know they went the way they wanted to.
Yeah, somebody wasn't left to grieve the other one for very long.
Right. Now, you don't only help people in your dreams, you also help the living, correct? With your.
I do. I mean, I live in Tucson, and of course, during the pandemic, there hasn't been very much travel at all. But I help out at a parish that doesn't have a pastor currently, and another one where I help out a little bit. And then because of doing all these podcasts, I encourage, at the end of the podcast, we'll give my website and YouTube channel and all that. And people contact me after seeing these things and bring different questions that they have, and sometimes they're of a personal nature. And so I end up doing some sort of consults with people on Zoom that are really sweet. And I really love it late in life that I'm a Catholic priest that's available to anybody who wants to talk to one. And I'm not preaching to the choir all the time anymore, because there's a whole audience that you're introducing me to, that if I sound like somebody that they might be able to relate to, maybe I can help with something.
Yeah. So you do one-on-one, and you have the retreats that you do.
Yeah,
Well, I'm sure that's
I use the word stuck in the subtitle of the first of the two Afterlife Interrupted books. We got rid of we struck through it in the second one because we really discerned that not all these people are stuck. It's just that they needed extra help. And some of them were stuck in something like a trauma loop. You must know a few persons in your life who grind away at the same problem and stay frustrated and so on. That's oftentimes why people go to a counselor at all. They feel like they need a fresh set of eyes or a new input. But some people recognize that they might be stuck now, and they contact me and say, do you work with stuck people who haven't died yet? And I say, well, I'll be the tow truck driver. I'll have one appointment with you and I'll help pull you out of the ditch, but I won't follow you down the road. I can't afford to be somebody's long-term counselor, but I think I can sometimes help people. That's helpful, Janet, because sometimes in starting a counseling relationship, people want to move very slow and steady, and it might take a number of weeks before you get to anything substantial. I've been in counseling twice, and that's the way I did it. I didn't just, spill my guts at a first meeting. But if they know that they've only got one shot, many people rise to the occasion and say, okay, if I've got an hour of your time, here's how I want to use it. And they'll lay their cards on the table, and I'll listen, and then I'll push back against some ideas. Oftentimes people paint themselves into a corner, and they decide that they're so frustrated because nothing's working. And I'll just listen for illogic. Or in a courtroom, what would be, what do they call that? A fact not in evidence. You ever watch courtroom dramas?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You can't just blurt out something in a courtroom and say that it's so. You have to prove it. And people do that in their own lives, in their own imaginations, and they'll just say things about themselves and their circumstance in their life or the people around them, and they'll come to a conclusion. And I'll say, prove that to me. That doesn't sound true. And so sometimes I can at least point them in the direction. And I do that. I pray in advance, and I pray during a session, and ask the Holy Spirit of truth to help me find falsehood and see if I can show people that there might be another way of thinking about the thing that you seem so certain about.
Yeah. You also call attention to where they got this information in the first place. Was it something that they took on from somebody else that's what they said, or did they misinterpret something? Isn't that correct?
There's all kind of ways that we can get ourselves twisted in knots. Some of it is family of origin stuff. It's messaging that you were not smart enough or fast enough or wanted or anything like that. That can just follow a person for a long, long time. That's a lot of it. And then other things, a lot of disappointments and discouragements and brokenheartedness that happens along the life path. Sometimes people blame themselves for things that don't necessarily need to have a blame. Some of the afterlife people have died in car crashes, and maybe other people died as a result of the crash that they were in, and so on. This one lady that's in the first of the two afterlife books died in a plane crash, and she made it her fault. She was a passenger in a plane that crashed, but she interpreted it as something that she brought on herself, and just said, sweetheart, that's just not the way plane crashes work.
No. So we have a tendency to put up our own roadblocks, and you help people take them down.
And it's still their life, and that's why I said the ones that come to me in the night are vetted. They've already been through that kind of stuff, and whoever has been taking care of them is now confident that they're ready to live in the truth, and that they're not going to deceive themselves with falsehoods any longer.
How often do you get a visitation? I mean, like a different person? Does it come once a week, once a month?
About once a week. Typically about once a week. Over all these years, it ends up being about 4 or 5 a month, which would translate into about once a week. Although sometimes the Holy Spirit knows me, lives within me, understands everything about me. And there are times in my life when I'm in a busy season and just running to keep up with immediate demands, and they'll take a break. And then when I catch a break in the rest of my life, I'll get 2 in the same night, or have visitors 3 nights in a row, something like that.
Wow. And it doesn't interrupt your sleep too bad?
No, not normally. I'm kind of a light sleeper. I mean, I get all the rest that I need, but I usually can go right back to sleep within the next 10, 15 minutes. I pray for them briefly. I try to keep a journal right on the nightstand, so I don't need to get out of bed and look for it, because that can make me be a little more wakeful if you have to turn the light on and walk around. So I try to remember to always have it where I can just reach over and grab the book, put the light on long enough to write the story down. Then it's easier to get back to sleep.
Have you tried recording it on tape talk or something?
Oh, I record the sessions that we do when we pray. When I'm with a prayer partner, I use an app on my phone, and those sessions take about 40 minutes, typically 30, 40 minutes. And then I just send them to be transcribed, and I get the transcription in a Word document, usually within 4 or 5 hours.
Wow.
Then I need to clean them up. There are a lot of ums and ahs. I mean, you're doing a show. Do you do your own editing of this show?
I do.
And so you have to go back in, and don't you get rid of a few ums and ahs?
Yeah, occasionally.
Or maybe incomplete sentences. I know that my speech pattern, the way it works, I frequently skip ahead to a new sentence before I finish the one I was talking about.
What are you working on next?
Podcasting. I was told a couple or 3 years ago that I should be podcasting, and I thought it sounded like you should colonize the moon. And I just thought that just sounds nuts. How in the world would I know how to do that? But I've been a guest on so many, and I'm studying how to do it right now. And I hope to launch maybe by the beginning of May. That was my goal.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
I have so many stories to tell. There's only 26 of them that are in the public, and I have 400 of them. I want to be able to tell new stories. I want to have the occasional guest, but I don't want to have a guest every time. And I also want to speak a little bit of how I understand all of this through the lens of my Catholic Christian faith. There's a whole lot of people that have some religious training but are no longer active in the religious faith of their childhood or of their earlier life. And sometimes they set it all aside, but life experiences make them sometimes circle back around and wonder. And I can be somebody that's safe to do that with. So I like to help people. People really like to know about the angels. You would think there are enough metaphysical bookstores in the world they're full of angel books, but people that have a real craving for that. Another one is the visitation stuff, like your mother did around death. Sometimes people have ghosts, or they have unwelcome experiences of disturbed entities of some kind around them. And so sometimes I end up, counseling a little around that. So there are topics that I want to take on some of the time.
Yeah.
And then I'm hoping that as the pandemic eases, and if we are able to do air travel and conferences again, I'm invited to Spiritual Awakenings International's conference. I'm in a keynote for them, but that's a Zoom one. That's in June. And then IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies, I have a proposal for a talk over the Labor Day weekend in Salt Lake City that will be live in a real conference hotel again. So, and then the Wizard of Oz stuff, the first book, this is the 100th anniversary of Judy Garland's birth.
Oh.
And there are a bunch of little towns that have festivals around either Frank Baum, the author, Judy Garland, towns in Kansas that turn Main Street into a yellow brick road. They're different places where Oz is celebrated in public festivals and things. I've never been to one, and I've just always thought that would be kind of fun because I know a lot about that stuff. So and then I didn't mention it, but even that place in Kentucky that got that horrific tornado that went through it in December.
Yeah.
I've taken the Wizard of Oz story in my book to Joplin, Missouri, where 165 were killed in a half an hour. and to Moore, Oklahoma, where 38 were killed in an instant, mostly children in a school, and come in a year later with this story that involves a tornado but is graceful. And I help people use that story that they already know to think about the joys and sorrows of what's happened to them, the light and the dark of what happened to their town and people in it. Because there's usually a flood of helpers that show up around tragic stuff, like we're watching in the countries around Ukraine right now. As horrible as the news coming out of there is, there are all these other people doing everything they can to keep somebody safe and housed and all that. So I like taking the Toto story on the road and using that to help people, I don't know, find comfort and meaning.
That's great. It does give people, a sense of peace and hope and help them with their grieving process. And I thank you for all that you do. And is there anything special that you'd like to tell the audience before we can give how to contact you?
Sure. Well, that's where I would go next. I would go with, if you think that I'm somebody you would like to interact with, my website is my name, Nathan, Nathan -Castle, Castle. So nathan-castle.com. If you go to that homepage, in the upper left is one of those little envelope icons where you click on it and it creates an email. We recently got our act together, and now before you can send me the email, you have to tell me what time zone you're in, and you have to send me a phone number too, so I can get back in touch with you. And I really don't like communicating on any other platform, Facebook Messenger or comments in YouTubes and stuff. If you really want me to reply to you, email me, because I'm on that all the time and I'm vigilant about it.
Oh, that's great. And this was fascinating. I think anything spiritual is very helpful to people because they're just really thirsty for knowledge and for comfort. So I really thank you for being my guest today.
May I mention too, I didn't say my YouTube channel, but it's just my name, Father Nathan Castle, on YouTube. And during the pandemic, I've had the leisure to organize it. It used to just be a dump of odd video thrown in on a site, and now it's pretty well organized. And I have a Bible study teachings that people might enjoy, and a lot of interviews, and a companion video series that I did that answers a lot of questions that are related to the Afterlife Interrupted stuff that we've been talking about. So people
I'll have to check it out. Yeah. And for our audience, I'll put all of his contact information in the description area so that you can find it easily if you don't have time to write it down here. So I want him to be able to.
How about you? Do you have a new project?
I am working on my next book, which is going to have my parents' story, because I took care of them the last 5 years of their life. And because of my near-death experiences, they felt comfortable in sharing all they experienced, saw, sensed, and felt during their dying process. And so I'm going to have their story in there, and I'm collecting other people's near-death and spiritual experiences, dream visions, anything they want to share that would be helpful to the public in the book too, because so many people have these spiritual experiences and they have a need to tell the public that this is something that they should share, but they don't feel that their story has the length of a book. So I'm giving them an opportunity to share their story and give them the healing.
Sometimes people have to get over the fact that they tried sharing it with somebody and were sort of shot down or stuff. And so it's nice that you're providing
Oh, thank you. Yes, it's important to me that they find that peace that they need. So now, as we head out for the day, I ask that you take note of what you dream about, because nighttime is the easiest time frame for spirit to come through. Write down your dreams and you may find that they hold an important message. And also I ask that you wake up each day with a sense of wonder on where you will be guided and what you'll be shown and who will be placed in your pathway for you to learn from or to teach. After all, life is the most magnificent mystical adventure you'll ever have. Enjoy and share your love, because the message I received from heaven for everyone is love is the only thing that matters. So go forward and share your love. And don't forget to subscribe below to see future amazing videos. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.